صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد. ولعنة الله على أعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last night we spoke about the return of Musa alayhi salam to Bani Israel after receiving revelation on Mount Sinai. We mentioned that initially that divine appointment was supposed to last for 30 days. وَوَعَدْنَا مُوسَى 30 لَيْلَةً. The initial period was 30 days. This is what Musa assumed, and this is what was mentioned to Bani Israel. The assumption was that Musa was to be away, was to be on the mountain for 30 days. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the same way that sometimes He changes rulings as a test, just like we mentioned with the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala required the believers to pay sadaqah whenever they want private counsel with the Prophet, and then that was changed. Similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He prolongs the 30 days by an additional 10 days. وَوَعَدْنَا مُوسَى 30 لَيْلَةً وَأَتْمَمْنَاهَا بِعَشْرٍ. The 30 days was extended by 10 days, and therefore Musa was on the mountain, on Mount Sinai, for 40 days. On the 30th day, the assumption of the entire community was that Musa was supposed to return. As soon as they saw that Musa did not return, doubt started to creep into the hearts of the Israelites. They became skeptical. They thought that maybe Musa died. Maybe Musa alayhi salam is not a prophet. If he was a prophet, he should have returned. This additional 10 days was one of the greatest tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put Bani Israel through. And it was during this period that a figure emerged among them who was able to misguide them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we mentioned in Surah Taha, verse 85, Allah informs Musa before he even comes down from the mountain. In ayah 85 of Surah Taha, قَالَ إِنَّا قَدْ فَتَنَّا قَوْمَكَ إِنَّا قَدْ فَتَنَّا قَوْمَكَ مِنْ بَعْدِكَ. That, O Musa, we tried your community after you left them. We tested them. Human beings are always tested. There is never a period in your life where you can say, right now, Allah is not testing me. Allah tests you with everything. With wealth, with poverty, even on days when you're bored. I have nothing to do. It doesn't seem like I'm being tested. Allah is testing you with your free time. There's always a trial. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals to Musa that the one who has caused this mutiny is As-Samiri. وَأَضَلَّهُمْ As-Samiri. Now we mentioned the reasons, the potential reasons, the possible reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this to Musa. We said that on the one hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals this to Musa. Why? To mentally prepare him. Because you can only imagine how devastating it must be for someone like Musa, who has spent years guiding his community, only to find them worshiping a calf, a golden calf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also informs Musa alayhi salam who the mastermind is, so he can address the root of the problem. When you're coming down and you see hundreds of thousands of people engaging in idol worship, to save time and get to the root of the problem, Allah reveals to him who the perpetrator is. And number three, to give him time to formulate a plan. How are you going to address this problem? Now, Musa alayhi salam comes down. As we mentioned, he expresses great anger. He's infuriated by what he sees. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-A'raf, ayah 150, وَلَمَّا رَجَعَ مُوسَى إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ غَضْبَانَ أَسِفًا. When Musa came back to his people and he was visibly angry and he was grieved, there was a combination of anger and feeling just pity for these people. What is wrong with you? How ignorant can you be? قَالَ بِئْسَ مَا خَلَفْتُمُونِي مِنْ بَعْدِي. That what a wretched thing that you did. What a wretched thing that you replaced after I departed you. أَعْجَلْتُمْ أَمْرَ رَبِّكُمْ. Were you that impatient with the decree of your Lord that all it took was for 10 days for you to completely deviate? And we spoke last night about why Musa alayhi salam showed so much anger. The Quran always speaks about the importance of restraining one's anger, but it is only a virtue to restrain your anger if your anger is over things that are silly, trivial. But sometimes it is a virtue, it is an obligation to manifest your anger, to convey the gravity of the sin that has been committed. And we mentioned that when Musa alayhi salam, he comes down, the Quran tells us that he has conversations with three groups, three parties. Last night we mentioned that the first person that Harun interrogates is Harun, because ultimately Harun is the leader. And with leadership comes responsibility. So Harun does not interrogate Musa because he actually believes that Harun is at fault. Harun is a prophet of God. He's infallible. But Musa alayhi salam wants to demonstrate that on the one level, that the buck stops with the leader. You are answerable. And number two, no one is above the law. Musa alayhi salam does not want anyone to accuse him of nepotism. That he's not going to just automatically side with his brother. No, he wants to set a standard that no one is above the law. Even Harun will be questioned. And this is what we see on the Day of Judgment. On the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will even question prophets. Not because the prophets are guilty, but because Allah wants to set the record straight. What was done? Did the prophets deliver the message? Yes. What was the response? There's a procedure that has to happen on the Day of Judgment. Allah in the Quran, He questions Isa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say to Isa, أَأَنْتَ قُلْتَ لِلنَّاسِ اتَّخِذُونِي وَأُمِّي إِلَهَيْنِ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. Allah will say to Isa, did you tell the people to take me and my mother as deities other than Allah? Did you say that? No, of course Allah knows. But Allah wants to reveal the truth. He wants the truth to come out. And similarly, Musa alayhi salam wants the truth to come out. He wants to separate Harun from the deviation that has occurred. So no one can use him to endorse the deviant path that they've taken. Now, the Quran then tells us that Musa alayhi salam, when he is asked by when Musa asks Harun, "Oh Harun, what prevented you from interfering?" Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quotes Musa in ayah 20, in Surah 20, Surah Taha, verses 92 and 93. قال يا هارون, who's speaking? Musa. قال يا هارون ما منعك إذ رأيتهم ضلوا ألا تتبعني أفعصيت أمري. Oh Harun, what prevented you from getting involved, from stopping them from worshiping the golden calf? Did you disobey me? Did you disobey my order? Now Harun alayhi salam is going to give us, he gives 3 reasons as to why he did not interfere, why he did not intervene. 3 reasons that are given. So now Musa is giving Harun the opportunity to explain the wisdom behind his silence, the wisdom behind him sitting aside and not aggressively pursuing the perpetrators. Number 1, so he gives 3 reasons. First reason, Surah Al-A'raf, Surah 7, ayah number 150. قال يا ابن Again, Harun is appealing to the emotional side of Musa. O son of our mother. قال ابن إن القوم استضعفوني وكادوا يقتلونني. Harun says, O son of my mother, the people, the Israelites, استضعفوني, they oppressed me. They deemed me weak. I was outnumbered. And it's interesting that Harun uses the same word, that they oppressed me, istad'afuni. This is the same Quranic term that Allah uses when He describes what Fir'aun did to the Israelites in Egypt. Inna Fir'auna ala fil ard wa ja'ala ahlaha shi'a yastad'ifu ta'ifatan minhum. Fir'aun was oppressing them. Allah, he istad'afahum. Here, Harun is saying that they oppressed me. So subhanallah, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts you in a position, you're in a disadvantage, you're being oppressed, and you are cursing your oppressor, thinking that you're better than them. But the moment Allah gives you the opportunity, gives you authority, you end up doing the same thing. So here, instead of learning the lesson from their days in Egypt, the Quran here reveals that there was a Fir'aun in each and every one of them. They were not able to oppress. Now that they have the ability to oppress, now that they have numbers and they have freedom, who are they oppressing now? They're oppressing Harun. This reminds me of the famous words of Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, the great Iraqi scholar. He says that he was speaking to students in the Islamic seminary. This was during the time of Saddam. He says that many of us, we send our la'na upon Harun al-Abbasi for what he did against the family of the Prophet, because he imprisoned Musa ibn Ja'far. And then he says to them, but my question for you is, it's very easy to condemn Harun, but how many of you have been given the dunya of Harun? Maybe if you were in that position, you would also throw Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim in prison. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals what is inside of them, that there was a Fir'aun in all of them. إِنَّ الْقَوْمَ اسْتَضْعَفُونِي وَكَادُوا يَقْتُلُونَنِي. And this is very alarming. Not only does Bani Israel rebel against Musa, not only do they worship the golden calf, they are so committed to idol worship that not only do they oppose Harun, they are willing to kill him to preserve their idol worship. Imagine how misguided these people are. how deeply rooted shirk was in their hearts. Many years Musa spent with them, but the stain of Jahiliyyah was still in their hearts. It's not that they said to Harun, let's just agree to disagree. No, no, no. You oppose us, we kill you. إن القوم استضعفوني وكادوا يقتلونني. Now, you may wonder, why didn't Harun just fight for the sake of Allah and get killed and be martyred? Doesn't Islam praise martyrs? Didn't Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam fight against the Umayyads? Why doesn't he get martyred? Now here, we come to the second reason of Harun. In ayah 94 of Surah Taha. So the first reason is they're going to kill me. And if they kill me, why is that a problem? If I am killed, Bani Israel will have no guide for them. Meaning that this is the danger of even having a community without a guide for a few days. Harun has a responsibility to keep himself alive. Because if he is killed, Bani Israel is left without any guide. Then we come to the second reason. Ayah number 94 of Surah Taha. إِنِّي خَشِيتُ أَن تَقُولَ فَرَّقْتَ بَيْنَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ. First reason is they may kill me. And that's it. You lose your support, O Musa, and there is no guidance among the people in your absence. There needs to be a divine guide. Second reason is that the reason why I didn't interfere is because if I drew my sword and I fought, you would have said to me that why did you split my community? Why did you create disunity among my people? Now, why would there have been disunity? You can imagine if Harun drew his sword and he fought against the idol worshippers. Of course, Harun also had supporters. The narrations say, just to give you a sense of how many people were on Harun's side, it's not that all of the Israelites were misguided by Samiri. The majority were. The narrations say that 12,000 Bani Israel were with Harun. Now you may say, MashaAllah, that's a lot of people. There were 700,000 of them there. That means 688,000 were either actively following Samiri or they were simply indifferent. And all that needs to happen for falsehood to prepare is for people to be silent. If you look at the history of Islam, Bani Umayyah did not have that many active supporters. There were enough people who were complacent to allow falsehood to overpower truth. If you look at those who actively fought Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam on the day of Ashura, they weren't that many. If you look at the entire army, the majority of them, they were there, but the majority of the ummah was indifferent. But that's all it takes. All it takes is the silence of good people for falsehood to prevail. Now, if Harun draws his sword and he's supported by 12,000, he has to go up against 688,000. Let's say not all of them are willing to fight, but a good number of them are. What's going to happen? There's going to be a civil war. There's going to be a civil war between the Israelites and Bani Israel. It's only been 3 months since they've crossed the Red Sea, according to the biblical accounts. So the community is too fragile, is too small for it to survive this type of rift. And this is another lesson for us. This is a very important lesson for us. Harun says to Musa that the reason why I didn't fight is because I was worried that our community would be divided. Now think about it. How many community members are there among Bani Israel? 700,000. Harun and Musa, to them, this community is too small to break into two groups. And then you look at the condition of our communities. I don't think you're going to find a single Shia community in the West that has 750,000 members. Maybe a few hundred, a few thousand. And we divide for reasons that are very trivial. Harun is willing to stay silent to keep the jama'ah together. He's not compromising, but the community has to stay together. Whereas some of our communities, we have a few arguments, a few disagreements, and we decide to do what? We're going to build another center. This is what we do. As if this is some type of jihad fi sabilillah, that I'm going to break away and start a new community. Now, there's no problem in having multiple centers if we're all working together, if we're coordinating. But for there to be a conflict and one community splits into two because of a disagreement, and some people act like this is really some type of struggle for the sake of Allah. No, the reality is that you took the easy way out. It's very easy to say, I'm going to break away. I'm not going to work out our issues. We're not going to resolve the problems. It's very easy to go and raise money and start a new center. That's the easy route. What's difficult is to be adults, to come together and identify what is the priority, to have humility. Problem is, communities fall apart. We're divided because of egos. That's very easy. It's very easy to just feed your ego and to say, I'm not going to work with these people. I'm going to start my own, my own organization. That's easy. What takes a lot of sabr, what takes a lot of humility is to look after the interests of the wider community. Not just your interest, not just what's convenient for you, to think about the entire community. Now, Harun, alayhi salam, he realizes that I have a choice now. Musa is going to return, and he will be able to deal with this fitna. He can resolve this problem. But if I draw my sword and I fight and there is bloodshed, the damage will be irreversible. Once the community breaks, it's very difficult to bring it back. It's very difficult. And we've seen this. It's much easier to be patient and to accommodate and to compromise rather than to split. Once you split, it's almost impossible to come back together. It's very difficult. So you see the wisdom of Harun alayhi salam. And this is why throughout the Quran, we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always emphasizes this notion of unity of the ummah. It's very important. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Ali Imran, Surah 3, ayah number 103. What does Allah say? وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hold on to the rope of Allah and do not be disunited. This is a commandment from Allah. This is a divine order. Do not be disunited. وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. And recall the blessing of Allah upon you. You know, one of the blessings of Allah that He mentions in the Quran for the Muslims is what? إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ. That you were enemies at one time, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought your hearts together. For many of us come from different racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds. We come from different parts of the world. There are different socioeconomic statuses in our community. The one thing that is bringing everyone together, irrespective of the color of their skin or how much money they have in the bank account, is what? Islam. Islam is the reason why we come together and we treat each other like brothers and sisters. This is the power of faith. Only faith can do this. Otherwise, what else can bring people together where they look at each other as brothers and sisters in faith? This is a ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوب فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا. Through the grace of Allah, through the mercy and the blessing of Allah, you became brothers and sisters. And this applies within our madhab. You know, sometimes some of the Shi'as would come to Imam al-Sadiq and there would be an argument between them. And most of the arguments between people are because of financial reasons. There was, a loan that wasn't given back, some issue related to money. They come to Imam al-Sadiq, and Imam al-Sadiq, he resolves the matter for them, and he says to them, if there is ever a dispute among two followers of Ahlul Bayt, and it relates to money, and this is the reason why they're not together and they're not speaking and they're disunited, the Imam says, come to me and I will give you money from myself just to solve the dispute. The Imam ﷺ is willing to sacrifice his own money just so mu'mineen come together, so we don't fight with one another. Now, does this apply only to other Shi'as, meaning this concept of brotherhood? When we look at our literature, do the Ahlul Bayt say that the bonds of brotherhood must be observed with only other Shi'as? No. We have a beautiful narration from Imam al-Sadiq salawatullahi alayhi. Imam al-Sadiq, and by the way, if you look at Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq he lived all of his life in Medina. Medina was not what we would call a Shia stronghold. There were more Shias in Kufa, there were more Shias in other parts of the world. But the Imam chose to live in Medina because the Imam does not want his followers, the followers of Ahlul Bayt, to be insular, to form their own bubble that's disconnected from the wider ummah. So that's not how we should be. The Imam says to one of his companions, he says, Ya Zayd ibn Shaham, Zayd al-Shaham. He says, Ya Zayd, khaliqun nasa bi akhlaqihim. Sallu fi masajidihim. The Imam says to Zayd al-Shaham that engage with people based on their customs and their traditions. As long as they're not doing anything haram, respect people's traditions. There's no reason why we need to make the ummah a monolith. Allow people to express their cultures. Allow that diversity in cultural expression. Be accommodating. Be open-minded. But of course, don't compromise Islamic values. And then the Imam says, Sallu fi masajidihim. The Imam is telling the Shi'as, pray in the masajid of non-Shi'as. They're also Muslims. Don't have this mentality that I'm not going to pray in this center because they are not Shia. The Imam says, Sallu fi masajidihim. Pray in their centers. Wa'udu marwahum. When they get sick, when members of their community get sick, you go and visit them. Washhadu janaizahum, and attend their funerals. And then the Imam says, وَإِنِ اسْتَطَعْتُمْ أَن تَكُونُوا الْأَئِمَّةَ وَالْمُؤَذِّنِينَ فَافْعَلُوا. If you are able to even be the Imam of their center, you can lead prayer or recite the adhan, do so. And the Imam here is even giving you permission to recite the adhan according to their fiqh. The point is there's a benefit in integrating into the community, brushing shoulders with other believers from different traditions. فَافْعَلُوا فَإِنَّكُمْ إِذَا فَعَلْتُمْ قَالُوا هَؤُلَاءِ الْجَعْفَرِيُّ. Because if you have good akhlaq with people of other madhabs, Imam al-Sadiq says if you have good character with them, if you have good manners, the people will look at you and say, these are the Ja'faris. May Allah have mercy upon Ja'far al-Sadiq for how he raised his Shi'as. But today, what do we see? Today, we see, especially on social media, as if people, they think there's some type of mujahideen fi sabilillah in the comment section, cursing this person, attacking this person, insulting this person. This is not the way of the Ahlul Bayt. We don't debate. Imam al-Sadiq, he has a very beautiful narration. He says, رَحِمَ اللَّهُ امْرَأً تَرَكَ الْمِرَاءَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مُحِقًّا. May Allah have mercy upon that person who abandons argumentation, even when he's right. The purpose of dialogue with other Muslims, and it's not so you can beat them in a debate and then make a YouTube video so you can get views. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to mutually arrive at the truth. We want to know the truth. We want to ascertain what is the sunnah of the Prophet. This is not about who's going to win the debate. The Imam says, if this is the direction of the discussion, then it's better to leave it. Because our purpose is not to upset people. It's not to offend people. It's not to provoke. It's to show them the truth. If they are receptive, have a conversation. If they're not, if they're hell-bent on their way, leave them. You don't need to argue. Look at how much we have departed from the ethical teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. So Harun alayhi salam explaining to Musa that I did not interfere because they threatened to kill me. And I have a responsibility to keep myself alive because there needs to be a guide among the Israelites. Number two, I feared that you would say that I caused disunity among your community. And I want to just mention one more thing before we go on to the third point. You know, there is not a single person in this hall that does not revere and love Ali ibn Abi Talib. There's not a single person. All Muslims, they love Amir al-Mu'mineen. In sermon 74 of Nahjul Balagha, Imam alayhi salam, he says something. And this is after the people are preparing to give bay'ah to Uthman. Amir al-Mu'mineen felt that he was the rightful successor of the Prophet. And this is what we believe. So now, his right has been taken from him by the first, the second, and now the third. So now it's going to be almost 20 years after the death of the Prophet, and his right has been taken from him. But what does the Imam say? After people are determined to give allegiance to Uthman, the Imam says, لَقَدْ عَلِمْتُمْ أَنِّي أَحَقُّ النَّاسِ بِهَا مِنْ غَيْرِ. He says to those who are in the shura with him, that you all know that I have the greatest right to the khilafah, more than anybody. But what does the Imam say? وَوَاللَّهِ لَأُسْلِمَنَّ مَا سَلِمَتْ أُمُورُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. But I will accept what the people decide as long as the affairs of the Muslims are guarded. And then the Imam says what? وَلَمْ يَكُنْ فِيهَا جَوْرٌ إِلَّا عَلَيَّ خَاصَّةً. And I accept this. I will go along with this decision. And I don't mind being the only one who is oppressed. If I am wronged, that's okay. As long as other Muslims are being treated with dignity. As long as Islam is being preserved. I am willing to relinquish my rights. Look at what Amir al-Mu'mineen says. Why is he doing? Why are you doing this, Ali? التماسا لأجر ذلك وفضله. I'm doing this for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to seek reward from Allah azza wa jalla. Look at how much Amir al-Mu'mineen was willing to sacrifice to keep the ummah together. And you and I, we're not even in positions of authority, and we go out of our way to create disunity. The Imam alayhi salam, he has a right. He is the Khalifa of the Prophet. You and I, we have no right. But we don't follow Amir al-Mu'mineen. We follow, these brazen people who provoke and who insult, and we think that this is shaja'ah, this is courage. No, this is courage. What Ali ibn Abi Talib did, this is real bravery. This is real courage. This is real taqwa. Sometimes we confuse recklessness with courage. That's not courage. That's reckless. That's a lack of taqwa. This is the shaja'ah. This is the patience that we have to learn from Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then number 3, Harun says in ayah number 94 of Surah Taha, وَلَمْ تَرْقُبْ قَوْلِي. I'm also afraid that you would think that I did not respect your word and your authority. To draw my sword and go into a civil war with Bani Israel, this is not something that I felt that I had the right to do. This is not a decision that I felt that I could make independently of consulting with you. At the end of the day, Musa is the one who was given the kitab. Harun is subordinate to the nubuwwah of Musa alayhi salam. There's a chain of command. There is a chain of command that has to be respected. And there is a reference to this in the Quran, a very subtle reference to this idea of respecting the chain of command that Allah has placed. When the angels come to announce that the community of Lut, the community of Sodom and Gomorrah are going to be destroyed, who do the angels tell first? Who is the prophet that was sent to Sodom and Gomorrah? Prophet Lut. You notice in the Quran, who receives the news that Sodom and Gomorrah will be destroyed? Who receives it first? Ibrahim. If you look at the Quran, the angels first, they tell Ibrahim, and then they go and they tell Lut. You may think that, but this is Lut's community. Why don't they go straight to Lut? Is because there is a hierarchy of Allah's hujjaj on earth. There's a chain of command that this decree, yes, this directly impacts the community of Lut, but we cannot disrespect the chain of command. Ibrahim is the top prophet of the time. He has to be aware. So Harun here does not make any unilateral decision without consulting with the chain of command. And similarly, this is what we see with Amir al-Mu'mineen. The sermons in Nahj al-Balagha, Imam was not delivering sermons during the lifetime of the Prophet. Why? Because there's a chain of command. Rasulullah is there. Ali is not going to give a sermon if the Prophet is there. You see that these sermons, they come after the Prophet. There's a chain of command. And Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam was so sensitive to this, to respecting this hierarchy, that even when it comes to naming his sons, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he says to the Prophet, when Hassan and Hussein are born, the Prophet says to him, "Oh Ali, what have you named this child?" Amir al-Mu'mineen, what does he say? "Ma kuntu li asbiqa Rasulullah." That I would never name him without consulting, without the messenger of Allah naming him for me. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam had this. And this is what we see in Harun. This unwillingness to make a drastic, a major decision like this without consulting with the prophet of the time. Now, when Musa hears this, the three excuses that Harun gives is that they threaten to kill me, I'm afraid that it will create disunity, and there needs to be a respect for that chain of command. What is the response of Musa alayhi salam? Ayah number 151. قال رب اغفر لي ولأخي وأدخلنا في رحمتك وأنت أرحم الراحمين. Musa alayhi salam, he says, "My Lord, forgive me and forgive my brother." Question: why is Musa asking for forgiveness if him and his brother are innocent? They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't commit a sin. The Quran and the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt teach us that istighfar is not always about asking God to forgive you for a sin. Because we know the Prophet ﷺ is infallible. Rasulullah is the highest of God's messengers. And the narrations say that he would ask Allah for forgiveness 70 times a day, while he has not committed any sin. You and I were the opposite. We commit 70 sins a day and we don't do istighfar one time. We're the opposite. Istighfar, seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is not only related to sinning. These people like Musa and Harun and the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt, they see themselves standing before Allah and they recognize that they are unable to thank Allah and worship Allah in a way that He deserves. And therefore they constantly feel inadequate before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They feel deficient before Him. So they're not asking God to forgive them for their sins. but forgive us for being weak creatures that are not able to worship you as you deserve to be worshipped. Now, you and I, someone like me, I have to do istighfar for my sins. And we should always get into the habit of doing istighfar. Because I tell you, brothers and sisters, that the Quran even tells us that the overwhelming majority of pain and anguish and suffering that we experience in this life, most of it is from our own hands. It's a result of our sins. Some of us, we commit so many, we're not even aware of what we're doing. The injuries, the sicknesses, the difficulty, most of it is a result of our own doings. Maybe today we're suffering because of a ghiba that we made 10 years ago. We don't know. And this is part of Allah's mercy, that the purification is happening here and not in the afterlife. We have to get into this habit, especially in the month of Ramadan. So here, by this dua, Musa alayhi salam makes it clear that Harun is innocent. Harun alayhi salam, what he did was the epitome of wisdom. He explained why he did not draw his sword and oppose the idol worshippers. And as I said, and this is being done in the Quran to counter the biblical narrative, which accuses Harun of being the mastermind behind the construction of the golden calf. Now, inshallah, tomorrow night, we'll speak about As-Samiri, the second individual that Musa alayhi salam interrogates is the mastermind, As-Samiri, and inshallah we'll look through those ayat in the subsequent nights. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.